Welcome back, Akira Bike Project fans. We left off in the last video with my Kickstarter, which, though unsuccessful, brought me to the attention of a motorcycle engine manufacturer based out of Seattle, which then prompted a job offer and a cross-country move. I packed up everything I had in a 20-foot shipping container and hit the road. Visiting some famous sites along the way, I stopped at Niagara Falls for an evening. I took a detour through Canada just to see what our neighbor to the north was like, coming back to the U.S. near Thunder Bay, and then passing through North Dakota on I-94 in the dead of night. There was so little light pollution that I had to pull over and just lay on my car hood staring at the stars for a while. Before leaving North Dakota, I turned south to hit a cluster of national monuments and parks. My first detour was through the famous Badlands of South Dakota, where the soft stone and clay-rich ground had been extensively eroded by wind and water, forming just about every type of geological structure known at a smaller scale striped with magnificent colors. I then swung by the famous Mount Rushmore, and then of course visited its ever-in-progress companion, the Crazy Horse Monument. Heading back north again, I went by the absolutely magnificent Devil's Tower, one of the most amazing geological structures in the world, made famous in the movie Close Encounters of the Third Kind. It's a fantastic example of columnar basalt, in which a massive underground lake of lava cooled slowly over eons, forming large regular hexagons of basalt, which were then squeezed and deformed before completely solidifying. Then as the whole continental plate heaved upward, the softer dirt and stone around the columnar basalt eroded away, leaving the massive stunning tower out in the middle of nowhere. I continued on west, passing through the mountainous, picturesque Montana, and then to the igneous deserts of northern Idaho and western Washington. I crossed the Columbia River, carving gorges out of the lava plains of the area, at Wanapum Lake. There are few things that will give you an intuitive sense of the grand scale and geological and biodiversity of America than doing a cross-country drive will. I've done it half a dozen times, a different route each time, and every time it's amazing. I hope to do it many more times. I personally think it's something every American ought to try to do to truly appreciate the country. I finally arrived in Seattle after a week of traveling. Well, in the intervening months since I was offered the job, packed, and moved out, the situation had changed for the owner, and he regretfully informed me that they changed their mind and would no longer be launching a new brand of motorcycles. Having just moved across country, I was of course shocked and dismayed. Later, a colleague ran up to me and said, "Oh, don't worry, he changes his mind all the time." Well, that honestly didn't really make me feel any better, but he did change his mind again soon after, but would change it still again, and go back and forth a few times. It was quite a roller coaster ride, and I became reluctant to even unpack my things. Eventually, though, I did take over a small, unused part of the shop and finally unpacked my bike and tools. But I didn't feel at home in the shop and didn't get much work done on my bike and didn't even have power for my welders. We did take a 1,000-mile ride from Fresno, California to Seattle on some of the prototype bikes. And man, that was a great ride and a great introduction to the West Coast. Riding the coastal highway most of the way and even going through the redwood forest as the sun was setting. I learned a tremendous amount, made some great friends, and had some amazing experiences. Lance gave me a crash course in CNC machining. Ant shared his absolutely encyclopedic knowledge of motorcycles, cars, engines, and history. John inspired as a brilliant inventor and entrepreneur. And Irma helped me adjust to a new life in the Pacific Northwest. I did make some progress, though. A little bit of spare time, access to a CNC, and some rudimentary machining skills. I decided to upgrade the front-end fork mounts, leading links, and caliper mounts. I started here with a mounting block that would hold the blanks for the leading links as they were machined. then put some holes in the blanks that match the mounting block. I later learned there are much better ways to hold pieces as you machine them, but fixturing in CNC is an art and a science all its own. Here the blank is bolted to that mounting block, and the outline of the leading link is cut into it. This is 6061 aluminum, a common alloy that has a good balance of strength and toughness. You can see the two outlines here though. The first one ran off the side of the blank, so I had to move the whole pattern slightly to the right. And then here the leading link is cut out of the blank and faced. Looks really good, not bad for my very first part. I did the tool pass, the offsets, and the modeling for the part. And so here are the new, beefier CNC'd leading links compared to the previous ones that I cast and machined. Note, these are my third iteration. The first were steel 1/4 inch thick plate, then the ones I cast were about 5/8 inch aluminum, and then these are CNC 3/4 inch thick. So next up is the Caliper Mount. Again, I used my little mounting block method. I'm not particularly worried about the reduced strength from the holes and recesses from this method, as these pieces are already significantly over-engineered. And then here is the piece almost cut out. This is a contour cut, which traces the outline of the part and moves inward, only removing about 1/4 inch of the material for each pass. And the final piece is cut out, again compared with the originals. The Caliper Mount also experienced a slight modification, which you'll see more about later on. I next moved on to the front end fork mounts. These would hold the leading links to the fork. These started out as 3-inch solid round bar stock, cut to length and then faced on the lathe. They were then moved to the CNC, where the first flat edge was machined into them, and then the rounded end and some mounting holes. They were then flipped over and a good chunk removed from that side to make room for the leading links. This was my first multiple position job. Each time you move a part in a fixture, you introduce a chance of misalignment. Every additional position adds complexity, time, risk, and cost. So this part had a third position, stood upright, and a hole is bored out for the actual fork tube. And the final result with the fork tubes mocked up. Contrast that with these, the old cast front end forks. The improvement is pretty significant, and you've seen now how often the design changes along the way while developing a prototype. Putting those new pieces together and the front end is starting to look pretty good. Here's one of our 100 cubic inch V-twin motors. Crazy Horse Motorcycles supplied our V-twin motors to Paul Jr. of American Chopper fame's builds, and you'll see our bottle cap engines in many of his bikes. And around this time we received a call from Paul Jr. about rebuilding a motor that was flooded during Hurricane Sandy. As Ant, our engine builder and troubleshooter, was traveling for a few weeks and I was still quite new, the owner had a motorcycle engine builder he knew in Connecticut rebuild the engine. Since this was a nice opportunity to learn more, meet some associates in the industry, and visit my family, I flew out to assist and observe the rebuild and deliver the completed motor to Junior. I met up with my father and we delivered the rebuilt motor to Junior's shop and met Vinny and Cody. Next, I glommed a tire and wheel from the shop. I wasn't happy with the tire wheel combo I was using. Unfortunately, this one only had holes for the brake rotor on one side. The long low geometry of a recumbent enables the front to do significantly more braking without worrying about the rear rising up and doing a stoppie, and a single-sided rotor on the front just wouldn't be enough. So we stuck it in the CNC and drilled and tapped 5 holes to make it support a dual rotor. Adding that new wheel to the front end with the new fork ends, leading links, and caliper mounts looks pretty good too. Well, that's it for this update. I hope you're all enjoying the journey so far. I apologize for the delay in this video coming out, but a couple things came up here that I had to take care of. The next one should be back to a more normal cadence. As usual, please like, subscribe, and share. If you got any questions, go ahead and leave a comment, and I'll see you again soon.